county railways and somehow get up there and live there. And if you can find a square mile of Switzerland that somebody is not already living in, you're a better man than I am, because I've tried. It is not desolate. It is not a wilderness. It is not deserted. And as nice as Switzerland might be for the place of safety, all those mountains and caves and greenery, it's not going to be Switzerland. And as nice as Switzerland might be for the place of safety, all those mountains and caves and greenery, it's not going to be Switzerland. Now, Revelation 12 is talking about a desert-style wilderness. That's pretty clear. No other place would be that inhospitable and that desolate and that deserted. Now, we know it's got to be a kind of a wilderness. It's got to be a kind of a desert, but where? How about the Navajo Desert over in Arizona? It is deserted there. You get the other side of Kingman and around Gallup, and I mean, it's like the end of the world, unless you really like that kind of desert, which I do not. And, round, what do they call it, Round Rock, up, way up in the Navajo Reservation, it is really deserted and desolate. Is that where we're going to go? Well, the Bible says no, because the Navajo are the wrong race. You see, the Bible says that we're going to be protected on Arab land, not an Indian land. It's got to be an Arab country, and there got to be Bedouins there. And if there are no Bedouins there, at all, it is not where the place of safety is going to be located, because there got to be Bedouins there. There have to be Bedouins. I'll show you that in a minute. And it's got to be within a day's driving or flying distance of the city of Jerusalem. And that we can also prove. Now that eliminates Kingman and Gallup. Because even if you take the best El Al jet from Jerusalem and you fly madly to New York and across to Chicago and down to, where else? Maybe Tucson or Phoenix, and then you drive madly up to Kingman, it'll still take you a day and a half. And the Bible says less than a day to make the trip from Jerusalem to the place of safety. Actually, from Jerusalem across the Allenby Bridge to the east, and across the West Bank, and up to Amman, and then down the Amman-Petra Highway is about 3.5 hours by car, maybe 4 if you have a slow car. And that's about how long it's going to take, God. It says Matthew chapter 24. We'll zoom through some of this very quickly. Matthew chapter 24. It's going to have to be an Arab land and within a day's drive of Jerusalem. That's clear in Matthew chapter 24, verse 14. Notice what it says. And I'll show you one of the signs of our leaving for the place of safety, but it's the final sign. There are going to be 2 signs, by the way, that it's time to leave. Really, it is one sign in 2 stages. And we'll be showing one sign several weeks before the deadline, and then there'll be a second sign the day of the deadline. Sort of interesting. So it's one sign in two facets, and I'll try to explain those to you in a few minutes. Verse 14. All the world for a witness unto all nations, then shall the end come. Now verse 15 says, when you therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel, stand in the holy place. So that is the desecration of a Jewish place of worship. I'll talk about that someday. In the city of Jerusalem, and Europeans are going to desecrate that place of worship. So European combine that will do it. When that occurs, verse 14, then let the brethren that still happen to be in Judea, not elsewhere, the others will already have gone. It'll be too late if you wait until that happens. You won't have time to get there, because that happens the day when the place of safety is closed to new arrivals. That's the second sign, and the second sign is only to those in Judea. We'll already have fled. Maybe some of us will be there in Judea that day. Others may already be in the place of safety. Then let those that be in Judea flee into the mountains. Now, why do I say they only have a day? It's very clear. That sign, Daniel chapter 12 tells us, occurs 1,260 days. When that temple is desecrated before Jesus Christ comes. That's 3.5 years. The book of Revelation chapter 11 says the 2 witnesses do their work for 1,260 days in Jerusalem. That's interesting. The book of Revelation 12 makes it very clear that we will be in the place of safety. We will be there 1,260 days. And yet the final sign to flee, you see, occurs 1,260 days, but that's the period of time we're supposed to be there. You see how it all comes together? That's the last day. These people are down in Jerusalem, and they're right there, the deadline day. And they got a few hours to get out of town and to flee into the place of safety. Most of the others of us will long since have made that trip. Of course, we may all be there that day. I don't know. Helping the 2 witnesses set up their work and getting Jerusalem ready for them. If we're in Judea, that day you flee. And once again, the time setting is pinpointed. Don't come out of the housetop and come down and take something out of the house. If you're off in the field, don't race back to get your clothes, because you'll have no time to do all of that if you're in Jerusalem. Time is going to be at a premium. You'll have a few hours to make it before the days of that city of refuge, the doors, literally close. Woe unto them, verse 19, that are with child, and to those that give suck in those days. Pray that your flight be not in the winter or on the Sabbath day, for then shall be great tribulation worldwide, and we'll be protected from it once the flight has taken place. Now, I want to show you it's not in Jewish soil. It is near Jerusalem, but it is not in Jewish soil. I'll also show you can see Jewish soil from the place of safety, though. You can literally see the land of the Jews from the heights where the place of safety is located. God says, wherever you go into safety, make sure there are mountains there, and you can climb those mountains. It'll be on Arab land, and you can look from the mountains off in the distance, and you will see the land of promise stretching out before your eyes, but you will not be in the land of promise. Now, that sort of narrows things down, doesn't it? I don't think Switzerland fills the bill. I don't think L.A. County is that place. Daniel 11, verse 40, God says he will supernaturally protect a piece of Arab real estate for 3 years, not 3.5. We'll be in place of safety 3.5 years, but this one country that is an Arab nation will be protected for 3 of those years, but not for the last 6 months. Daniel chapter 11, verse 40. The king of this nation that is described here is king of Saint of Jordan. God is describing the basic limitations of a little Arab country that is across the river Jordan from the nation of Israel. You go east from Israel, you come into the nation of Jordan. And it's a little Arab country. It's been there as long as Israel has been there, only a couple of decades. But it is there. And in that nation, 3,000 years ago, 3 tiny peoples dwelled. Those 3 tiny people, some of them are still there, some of them are not. But the nation, the area in which those peoples live, is going to be protected by God for 3 years. Why? I think you'll see in a minute. Verse 40 of Daniel 11. At the time of the end shall the king of the south, the leader of an Arab combine, push at Haman, the king of the north. This is the leader of this European resurrected Holy Roman Empire, shall come against this Arab ruler and begin to destroy Arab countries. Verse 41, he shall enter into the glorious land. Now, Israel is not, the Jews do not have an Arab land in a sense, but they're surrounded by Arabs. And many countries shall be overthrown, but these shall escape out of his hand, out of that attack. Even Edom, and Edom was in no longer is, but used to inhabit what is now the southern end of the nation of Jordan. Please remember that. They lived in the southern end of what is now Jordan in the Sinai. And Moab used to live in the central part of what is now Jordan. And the chief of the children of Ammon lived in the northern part of what is now Jordan, and most of them still do, by the way. The capital of the nation of Jordan is even named, still named Ammon, which comes from Ammon. And most of those people are still there. He shall stretch forth his hand upon the countries and the land of Egypt, and all the other Arab nations will not escape that unbelievable war. But the nation that is now located where Edom once was, where much of Moab still is, and much of Ammon still is, shall be preserved. The question is, why preserve a whole nation? I thought the place of safety was only one little city. Well, you thought right. But God is going to preserve the major part of a tiny nation so we can build the place of safety into a magnificent city. And we've got to have some facilities. And we've got to have some help to do that. And I'll get to that in a couple of minutes. Now, why will God give stability and a certain amount of prosperity to that area called Edom, Moab, and the chief of the children of Ammon for 3 long years, but not for the final 6 months? They'll cut off the center and the northern part of the country in the last 6 months and only protect the south, where we apparently are going to be. Now, what about the idea of Petra? Back in the 50s, we used to talk about Petra all the time. You know, some of our members would go over there and they'd bring back little bottles of sand and hawk these bottles of sand at the Feast of Tabernacles and say, $1.50 for a bottle of Petra sand. And we used to have to stop them. People would go over there and try to make money off of selling Petra sand. What about Petra? I want to read something in a standard Bible dictionary. This is the InterVarsity Fellowship. And I want to read a little bit what they say about that city over in the Middle East that we call Petra, page 1158. I'll read you what they say, sort of interesting. Sila or Petra etymologically, the word Sila means a rock or a cliff and may be used in any rocky place. There is, however, a specific Sila in the Bible, which may now be identified with the massive rocky plateau also called el Biara, which towers 1,000 feet above the level of Petra. And there originally was an Edomite settlement here. It was the capital, in fact, of the old nation of Edom, mentioned in Daniel 11. Now, that nation, run by the Edomites, was finally taken over about 300 B.C. by the Nabatean Arabs, who converted the great valley of Petra, enclosed by mountain walls, into the amazing rock-cut city of Petra, the rose-red city, half as old as the dead. And the Nabatean Arabs did that after the Edomites left. They built Petra there. Who are these Nabatean Arabs? I want to look up Nabatean. We'll just sort of read what it says about Nabatean Arabs, because 859, that's the page, we'll see who they were, and maybe we can come to some conclusions about where we'll be going. Nabatean Arabs, they took over from Edom. Notice what it says. The Nabatean Arabs were a nomadic Arabic tribe who didn't build houses or till the soil. They just wandered around, and that's what made them nomads. Their territory was the area south and east of the River Jordan, south and east, spreading the trade routes from the Orient to the Mediterranean. And their ancient capital was called Petra. Petra is 50 miles south of the Dead Sea. Petra was a stronghold for many, many hundreds of years. The Nabatean Arabs living in Petra began to cultivate the area because there is a rainy season. It is a howling wilderness when there's no rain, but there is some rain. With the skill of Nabatean engineers, they constructed irrigation systems, to conserve the scanty rainfall October through March. Rains a little bit. Many of their dams and reservoirs are still usable, in fact. They just need some repair. Well, that is very, very interesting. Who knows? Petra is surrounded by high cliffs pierced by narrow ravines which form an almost impregnable defense, and so it goes. Talks all about them. What happened to the Nabatean Arabs that did this? Well, the Nabatean people became absorbed in the surrounding Bedouin population, though the script continued to be used in the 4th century. They were sort of absorbed into the surrounding population. The indication is, however, that they are still there. They just became a part of the local Arab population, and the local Arab population has the tradition that they have been there for some 2,000 years, if not more. And they're called Bedouins because they wander, and traditionally they claim to be descendants of the Nabatean Arabs. You ask the Bedouin there, who are your ancestors? They say, our ancestors built Petra. They were the Nabatean Arabs. Now, was that significant? Turn to Isaiah chapter 42, and I'll show you that it is. Boy, is it significant. Isaiah 42 describes the coming of Jesus Christ and tells us, in a sense, where Jesus will find servants of his who will be singing, who will be serving him, who will rejoice when he returns. Isaiah 42, verse 1, my servant whom I uphold. It talks all about Christ's coming. Verse 10 says, sing unto the Lord a new song, and his praise from the end of the earth. You that go down to the sea and all that is therein, the isles and the inhabitants thereof. Verse 11 now, talking about his return. But the wilderness, that's the desert. What desert? The desert off in Arizona, up in Victorville. But the wilderness and the cities thereof lift up their voice. The villages that Kedar inhabits are to sing. Who is Kedar? I'll look up Kedar in my little handy Bible dictionary, because I'm sure it'll give me an answer. Kedar, in its restricted sense, denotes a nomadic tribe that inhabited the Arabian desert many hundreds of years ago. But the name is often used in the Bible and in rabbinic literature as a collective term for the Bedouin community in general. Now, the Arabs, called Nabatean Arabs, who live around Petra, call themselves Bedouin or Bedouin. And they live there some of the time, but they basically wander, and they view themselves as the descendants of the Nabateans and as the descendants of Kedar. Let the area of the Middle East in which the Bedouin live rejoice. Let the inhabitants of Petra sing. Now, the Bedouin don't live in Petra. They go through there, they camp there, they graze their sheep there when there's some water, but they don't live in Petra. They live around that area. But here are people living in, and it says in the Hebrew language, let the inhabitants of the city of Sela, let the inhabitants of Petra sing. Who is doing the singing? Those unconverted Bedouin with their flocks, or somebody else who happens to live, you see, in the area in which Kedar dwells. Let them shout from the top of the mountains. Oh, you mean those mountains will still be standing where the Bedouin live? Hadn't you read that all the mountains are going to be flattened before Jesus comes? Hadn't you read in Revelation that all the mountains flee out of their place? that God will flatten the Alps and flatten the Rockies, and there'll be unbelievable earthquakes. Yet here in the Middle East, in the area where a rather small, and only a few thousands of them, Bedouin people live, there are mountains standing, and up on the top of those mountains that have not been flattened,